Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Connect. Welcome back to Connect for those who are returning. Welcome to those of you who are joining Connect for the first time. It's great to have you with us. What we do in Connect each week is we spend some time just reflecting on usually the Bible passage that we have been studying on Sunday the week prior, and really allowing time for us to ask our questions about that and to think about how we put what God has been saying to us into practice. And so this week we're thinking about the relationship between science and faith. Now, I'm sure all of us know at least one person in our lives who would say, I can't believe in the Bible because science, basically. And maybe that makes us feel a little anxious about science. Maybe we try not to think about it too much. And when we do think about it, we just think, gosh, wouldn't it be awful if science uncovered something that just disproved the Bible and meant that I couldn't believe it anymore. But what Genesis 1, well, the first thing I think that we draw out of Genesis 1 is that the Bible's expectation is that science and faith hold together. They are two sides of the same coin. We see in Genesis 1 the repeated phrases, and God said, and it was so. In other words, what we're seeing is that there is unity between God's world and God's word. When we hear God speak to us in the Bible, we should expect to see something that correlates with the world around us. And where we don't see that, the reason is not that there's a disagreement between God's word and God's world, but because we're not understanding something clearly. It's on us rather than on the word and the world. Now, that might sound great, but the reality is we still need to understand how these two things do fit together in order to make that argument plausible to us. So there are three, broadly speaking, schools of thought that try and bring science and faith together, particularly from Genesis 1. The first is known as young Earth Creationism. And young Earth Creationism believes that the Earth was created in 6 literal days, approximately 6 to 10,000 years ago. Now that is very different from a lot of what scientists believe, which the way that objection is overcome is by saying that the flood would have radically changed the geological record, for example, and the fossil record. And most science doesn't take that into consideration. Most science doesn't believe that the flood was a literal event. And therefore, when we interpret scientific data through the lens of the flood, then it makes sense with a literal understanding of Genesis chapter 1. That's the first way of thinking about it. The second school of thought would be old Earth creationism. So old Earth creationists would understand Genesis 1 to be poetry more than to be read literally, to be communicating true things about the way that God made the world, but that the days and the time particularly is not meant to be understood literally. And so old Earth creationism understands the Earth to be old, but would argue that Adam and Eve are still to be understood as historical. The fall is still a historical event, and that we shouldn't throw everything out as metaphorical in favour of evolution. Which leads us to our third way of understanding what's going on and the relationship between science and Genesis 1, which is Theistic Evolution. Similarly to old Earth creationism, there's an understanding that Genesis 1 is metaphor and poetry, while still teaching us things that are true about God and how he made the world. But it affirms evolutionary process and would see Adam and Eve not as historical figures necessarily, but either as a kind of literary representative of hominids as life and humanity evolved, or would say them as two historical figures that God kind of chose from about a group of about 10,000 hominids who are together our ancestors. So I'll give you a chance in a moment in your groups to discuss what you think and why, and if you've thought about it, then great. If you've not thought about it before, don't worry. This is a chance to ask some questions and to think in a little bit more depth. I would just encourage you as you go about that conversation to do so with humility, first and foremost, knowing that at least some of the things that you may well think are absolutely rock solid and concrete could be completely wrong. Listen as much as you speak. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to have that conversation seeking unity. This is not something for us to divide over, because thirdly, and perhaps most prominently, we should focus on the things that we can be sure of as well as the things that we can't be. What does Genesis 1 tell us that we can all affirm? That God made the world, that he made it good as a gift to us, and that Jesus was sent to fix what sin has broken, and through faith in him we can enjoy life now and also hope that the creation will be fixed and renewed when he comes again. So that's what we unite around. I hope you have a great evening talking about these things. I'm happy to have any kind of conversation with you if you have more questions following tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday.